This one has been a long time coming in my arcade port series, another one of those well-loved arcade games by Sega releasing in 1990. Alien Storm has always gone down as one of those timeless classics which can easily be paired up with some of the other Sega greats of the time. Golden Axe, Outrun, Altered Beast, Shinobi, all roughly from the same era but have all equally remained as some of the best in memory. Sega's very own development team known as AM1 produced Alien Storm. In fact, the same Japanese development team was also responsible for games such as Golden Axe. If you didn't play Alien Storm in the arcade originally, then you likely would have had a home conversion of it. Likely the most popular was the version for the Sega Mega Drive, in which it releases a standalone game and then appeared on the Sega Mega Drive Mega Games 3 cartridge, which featured alongside Super Thunderblade as well as Super Monaco GP. Alien Storm is considered as a hybrid between beat 'em up as well as railgun shooter, which makes a video like this one today fairly complicated in ranking, considering that the original arcade game comprises of a few varied sections from side-scrolling beat 'em up to railgun shooter to those very fast-paced stages where we're speeding along. For a particular port to get each one of these styles of the game in perfect form could be tricky, and especially since the notorious US Gold released some of these versions with the notorious Tiratex developing them. This could be tough. US Gold released games that even struggle to a one style of gameplay, let alone several. And yes, I'm talking specifically about the abomination of Final Fight and Street Fighter 2 that they chucked out. The game is based around defending planet Earth against alien invaders who quite naturally want world domination. Well, why not? We play the game as either one player or up to 3 players originally. We play as the Alien Busters, a special forces team tasked to take on the invasion. The characters originally are Karen, Garth and Scooter, although these names are different depending on where in the world you played Alien Storm originally. We battle our way against the aliens with a standard attack and a limited supply of special attacks which hits everything on screen in one go. We can roll around to avoid enemies attacking us, and we can also run and attack. A total of 6 main missions, each comprising of sub-levels, and we also get voice samples throughout the arcade game, and of course music and some tasty sounding sound effects too. Like I said, the original Alien Storm is going to be a tough game to compare due to so much happening originally in the arcade game. Today we are ranking from worst to best the very best version that you could have owned back in the day of the classic Sega game Alien Storm. I'll be honest with you, I have played a hell of a lot worse on Alan Sugar's 8-bit microcomputer, but this game definitely isn't much good at all. Sure, it doesn't look bad, it is decent enough looking for what it is with its lush looking high contrast colours, very typical of Amstrad's Mode 0 coded games, but this is where the game really stops, and I mean really stops. Stops so badly that it seems that certain sections of the game will not let you progress. Take for example the second part of the game where we are inside of the shop, in the rail shooter section. After zapping down loads of aliens, there are 2 remaining aliens who are creeping behind the shop aisles and spitting out slime. No matter how many times I shoot at these aliens just would not budge, and it just seemed endless. I'm not kidding you, I must have been shooting at them for around 5 minutes, in which case I loaded up the game once again and was put into the same situation a second time round. It doesn't matter how many times these 2 aliens would not die at all. So thankfully, to get past this annoying part, I used a cracked version of the game which I could skip the level altogether. Talking about the rail shooter segment, this wasn't actually a scrolling section like it should have been, or from at least what I've seen of it. Instead, we have a single screen, and the alien holding the girl hostage like in the arcade game, well, that's not here either. Now, as for the bulk of the game, the scrolling beat 'em up style parts, these, like I said, look good. They look good for an 8-bit microcomputer, but it seriously is let down by how it handles. Hit collision detection does work okay, but there are far too many times when I'm zapping aliens for it not to do anything at all. And of course we could also get slowdowns. Now, like I said, there have been a hell of a lot worse on the CBC in terms of arcade ports, but that doesn't let Alien Storm off the hook lightly. It's extremely blocky to control characters, and yes, we have all 3 characters to play as from the arcade game, but they do feel a little wooden to move around on screen, and the fun element that the arcade game offers is simply not here, full stop. When a game makes one feel stressed out over something like movement, then you know that it's a really badly developed game. Moving on to the running parts of the game, I'll be honest, these were likely the most enjoyable parts on the Amstrad, and although they were choppy, they did play relatively well compared to the beat 'em up and railgun sections. In terms of music, there is an option for music to be on or off, which I presume is in-game music. However, in the options menu, I opted for music, but didn't actually get in-game music at all. But I did manage to get sound effects, but I must say they were fairly poor, or at least very basic. And forget about voice samples in this version, there is none whatsoever. All in all, a good looking version of Alien Storm from US Gold for the Amstrad CPC, which released in 1991. But gameplay wise, it's not really much fun at all to play, as well as being broken in parts, or so it seems. Essentially, US Gold's ZX Spectrum game, which released for the Spectrum 48K and 128K models, seems identical to the Amstrad's version in terms of how it plays, that is. I mean, no question about it, this isn't as nice looking as the Amstrad's version, but at least this version actually worked, and I made it past the shooting section with no issues at all without the need of using cheats. We have all the same options as the Amstrad's version. As soon as the game boots up, we can select how we want to play the game. Of course, I opted for the Kempston joystick option to control the game. Now, of course, like I said, no doubt about it, the Amstrad CPC's conversion is probably the nicest looking version out of all the 8-bit computer ports, but the ZX Spectrum's characters here are much more detailed, as well as the backdrops, but only of course these are displayed in monochrome, which we shouldn't discredit too much, as the Spectrum was an extremely limited computer due to less superior support of offering several colours within games. It's much like this with the case of Amstrad versus Spectrum's versions. It's either opt for the CPC game, which seems to be broken but offers some charming looking visuals, or choose the Spectrum's version over it, which is less visually pleasing but actually is playable, where we don't have to rely on cheats to progress further into the game. In terms of speed and frame rates, then like I said already, it's almost identical to the Amstrad version. The Commodore 64's version is by far a big upgrade from the previous 2 versions, but again, is it a great version of Alien Storm? Well, it plays much smoother, and at least here there is in-game music, and the sprites and backdrops of levels are very nicely designed. The in-game music is actually fairly comparable with the arcade game itself. Of course, the mighty SID chip could produce much better than the music for the US Gold release, but of course it is attempting to emulate the arcade music, which was fairly basic to begin with, so in that department, yeah, the C64 version isn't bad at all. We don't get any sound effects in game though, unless we disable music at the start of the game. Presentation wise, the character selection screen again is a visual upgrade where we can scroll through all 3 characters to select who we'll play as in the game. It gives the whole arcade vibe here and does it fairly well too. Now on with the gameplay itself then. Well, in between stages, loading times even from disc are fairly hefty, but with the aid of emulation, all is not so bad, but still fairly annoying nevertheless. It is a fairly smooth game to play, and zapping aliens wanting to take over planet Earth seems satisfactory, and that hit collision detection is very good here, and certainly better than we have seen so far. We don't get an introduction animation scene, which is what the arcade game actually opens up with, neither do we get voice synth either, but arguably not every C64 game had this, although some did. As for the various styles of gameplay, we will start off with the main body of it all, which is of course the scroll and beat 'em up sections. I mean, sure, like I said, scrolling wise and sprite movement is fine. Everything flows nicely and zapping baddies is okay, and certainly is one of Teratex's best ports. One of the most standout features of all these sections is being hit by enemies. If an alien hits us, we fly across the screen in a real speedy manner. It just seems very bizarre. Jumping, again, just seems like it is far too speedy for its own good. However, having said that, when we roll to avoid aliens, this is actually fairly useful in this version. Just a case of holding down on the fire button whilst pressing joystick down to do this action. Although nothing significant, the C64 version even has shadows beneath enemies, and these look particularly good when flying skulls are around. It just makes these parts a little easier to shoot these enemies. As for the rail shooting parts, again, this is a cut above the CPC's and Spectrum's attempt in terms of visuals and scrolling. As we shoot down aliens, the screen very quickly scrolls to another part of the level and it all looks very good. The downside is that these sections don't last long with this version, but are certainly one of the C64's best parts of the game. And finally, for those segments which we speed through, again, nothing highly groundbreaking, but it scrolls really nicely and gets the job done. Let's just remind ourselves that I am not saying the Commodore 64 port of Alien Storm is a great game by any means, just possibly a slightly better than average arcade port, which also arrived from US Gold in 1991. If you're enjoying the content today, please like and subscribe, and also remember to hit that notifications bell and select all so you don't miss upcoming content. This channel also has a wealth of emulation tutorials, including standalone and front-end guides. Just Jamie is your ultimate go-to channel for everything retro related. Anyways, for now, on with the video. Sure, this has the more arcade look about it, and sprites are nicely sized, like that of what it's actually trying to copy, but this Commodore Amiga version that released in 1991 and also developed by Teratex isn't really wonderful, and most certainly not great for an Amiga game from 1991 either. I mean, the whole presentation is there for sure, but gameplay wise, it's kind of like the Commodore 64 game, but an upgraded 16-bit version. The opening of the game is nice enough where we see two halves of the Alien Storm logo crash onto each other, and the character selection screen is also good too, but it's missing too many opportunities. For example, you might expect a proper animated introduction given the Amiga's capabilities for doing this type of thing, but we get nothing at all. You might even consider extras in this game such as screaming victims running past you on the streets who are running from the aliens. Again, nothing here. It's much like I said, an upgraded Commodore 64 version, and like I also said, a fairly bad Amiga game for 1991 standards anyways. Having superior hardware, Teratex should have taken full advantage of adding more to the game to bring the arcade experience home, but I truly think this is a fairly lazy port in many respects. The 8-bit computer versions are a little more forgiven given their date and age at the point of Alien Storm's release, but really this is typical Teratex style, a pure cash grabber too from US Gold. As for in-game music, well, there doesn't appear to be any. Neither did I see an option for music in the menu anyway. We do, however, get some very rudimentary sound effects, and of course the Amiga was much more capable than this. We do get to play the game as choosing one of all three characters from the arcade game, or we can even play this version in 2-player mode. So everything is in order in that department at least, but I cannot comment on any of these ports as to if 2-player modes actually hinder the game in any way. My wife-to-be is more of a Disney cozy game girl, rather than defeating alien scum 1991 style. The platform and beat 'em up stages aren't particularly exciting to play. The rail shooting 3D segments are satisfactory to an extent though, and the running parts are also okay. I guess I would say one of the good features with the Amiga's version is using a special ability, although it is choppy when we see this take place, especially when using Garth's helicopter attack. It does kind of bring a touch of the arcade experience. And for the rail shooting segments, again, nothing really groundbreaking as such, but at least Terratech's bothered to make parts of the environment destructive here. Although it could have looked better, at least there was something added to kind of make it seem like this version was a 16-bit game after all. As for the running stages, again, nothing really special and just as good as the Commodore 64's version, only with nicer visuals. I found it incredibly difficult in comparing the Atari ST's conversion next to the Commodore Amiga's port, and the reason being is that both versions of Alien Storm are ridiculously similar. Of course, sound quality with the Amiga version was superior than this Atari ST's version due to arguably the inferior sound chip that the ST had. Having said that, I have ranked the ST version above Amiga's as the game did seem a little smoother and nicer to play. I mean, it could have been one of those occasions where the Amiga game was ported from this version directly. Rumour has it that this was a common thing back in those days, a little like the whole Spectrum and Amstrad scenario too. Even on those faster paced parts of Alien Storm, the frame rate was pretty much on par with the Amiga's version here. I can't really say much more out of both of these versions, and of course, it is a matter of preference after all, but as a hardcore Amiga fan, even I noticed that this version was much better to play. It's a seriously bad day when a Sega Master System could do a better job than a more than capable 16-bit computer, but here we go. This is a superb port, and the reason why this is simply because Terratech wasn't behind it. A developer known as Sims developed this Master System game, who also developed a few other notable decent Sega 8-bit games, such as the Castlevania style game Master of Darkness. Now granted, this is slightly different in places, but make no doubt about it, this is Alien Storm through and through, and it doesn't completely deviate from the arcade game too much. Firstly, you will notice that we don't have all three characters with this version, but we just have Garth and Scooter. It is also missing the 2-player mode too, which is actually a bummer if you want to play this game back in the day with a friend. Very possibly the most difficult of all versions with this game too. I found myself dying a hell of a lot in this game. Although it is slow paced, it makes up for it through its difficulty level alone. The challenging parts are that enemy AI is programmed differently here from most other versions. We do have limited special attacks, but I will be honest, nothing spectacular and nothing more than a couple of flashes, which then sees our alien friends annihilated. We get no cutscenes or in-game animations for the storylines, but come on, this is being powered by an 8-bit console, so sacrifices were to be made. In addition to levels being a little different to other versions in this video, we also have a unique alien monster in this version too, such as the monster known as Muck. Yes, the sprites are majorly scaled down, but it's all very recognisable regardless. Music wise, it's not actually bad. A typical Master System style tune with some surprisingly fairly good sound effects implemented. Like I say, it's truly a really sad day when a mere Sega Master System can easily make Amiga and Atari ST look so bad. But of course there are drawbacks. Sure, it's not spot on to replicate the arcade game, and we do have a lack of a second player mode, but I rate this at this spot because, let's be honest, everything else by Terratech in this list were fairly bad games. They weren't wonderful, and that's not to say it's simply because they were computer ports either. Particular computer ports have in some cases been so well done that they have ranked in very high places in my previous arcade ports videos. You likely realise that the Sega Mega Drive version was going to win the various ports of Alien Storm, and it's not really surprising compared with all the various other shoddy attempts, or should I say specifically US School's shady Tiratex attempts. I mentioned that the Sega Master System version was different in places. Well, the 16-bit Sega port is also different from other versions, and it's also unique too. But that's not to say that we only have 2 playable characters here. We actually have all 3 characters still, plus we can actually play as a 2-player game if we wish. Now, in good old-fashioned Sega Mega Drive style, we have several options too, including difficulty level changes, as well as other options such as sound tests. And we also have a dual mode too of that sort of thing. In comparison to the toughness of the Sega Master System's version, this release by Sega themselves is a walk in the park. Sega were also kind enough to increase the number of stages in this version too. So instead of having 6 stages like the arcade game had, well, we actually have 2 extra stages here, which is an absolute bonus if you love Alien Storm. On top of all of this, the sprites and backdrops and even the special attacks are all arcade's top quality. Well, as far as the Mega Drive can go with that regard. The sound in the Mega Drive game is extremely good here. Very similar to the sound of the arcade game itself. Killing aliens using special attacks all sound gripping with that Mega Drive sound chip giving us the very best. There is no issues with hit collision detection, and moving around the screen to walk beside enemies is silky smooth with no lag whatsoever. The 3D shooting sections are the best of all versions, and that's easy. Again, it scrolls beautifully, and the destruction caused towards things also looks really good. The crosshair will move absolutely anywhere too, whereas most other versions felt very wooden moving this around to shoot down aliens. As for those parts where we are running, these are of course flawless. Oddly enough, in most other versions, these sections auto-fired. Yet here, we do need to press on a button to shoot. But regardless, just like the other 2 sections, then of course this is awesome too. As for the introduction to the game, well, like I said, things are a little different here, but to some extent, at least there is something, and although fairly basic, it brings us that vibe that we have a purpose to play Alien Storm on the Mega Drive. The game is also brought to life here with all those nice bits and pieces, such as the comic book speech bubble style signs we get pop-up telling us to go indoors and take on more aliens. The colour palette used is also absolutely the best in all the versions of Alien Storm. Although slightly pale in tone though, it much more resembles that arcade game look. And that's it for ranking every port of Alien Storm. So do you actually agree with the order of ranking? Do you think I was a little bit too harsh with the Amstrad CPC? But as many fans are aware, I try not to be too biased, and let's be fair, I even criticised the Amiga's version in this, which is very out the ordinary for me to do. So, like I say, drop a comment in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Remember to click all when you subscribe to the channel. Until next time, stay retro.